visit. When that phone call was made, often, most of the time, Melissa Hughes was the one that answered the phone. She would then confirm the fact that it was a cage-free boarding facility, and she would set up a tour with the customers. When they arrived and they conducted the tour, they were shown the 2-acre farm, or the property, which quite frankly looks like a farm. It looks very wide open. It looks very inviting. They're shown outside. They're shown inside the home. The home was very well kept. They had many children inside the home, and that's where they sold their the familial environment that they would give to their customers' dogs. However, during these tours, the customers were never actually shown the 9x12 room in which their dogs would end up spending most of their days, would end up spending their last days. Throughout the course of our investigation, it was learned that the dogs were kept in that room, that 9x12 room, up to 18 hours a day inside that room. They were let out once in the morning for maybe an hour, and then they were returned back into the room, where they were kept there until a little bit, for a few hours, until closer to lunchtime. The dogs were let out for a brief moment, then they were brought back into the room. They were kept inside the room. A few hours, hours passed by, and then they're once again let out of the room. They're allowed to stretch their legs, run around for a short time, and then they're sent back into the room. Basically, they'd be let out about 4 times a day, but the rest of their time would be spent inside the room. This was the practice that was taught to the employees by Todd Hughes. This was the practice that was being employed while Todd and Melissa Hughes were out on vacation in Florida. The Hughes left for Florida on June 14th, 2014. And prior to them leaving for Florida, they did not tell the vast majority of the victims that they would be away from the facility. In fact, they left most of these victims with the impression that they would be hands-on, that they would be the ones actually caring for their pets while they were gone. Of course, Todd Hughes was being held out as a dog whisperer. This title of a dog whisperer comes without any formal training in animal husbandry or animal training of any kind, not that the state is aware of. So with these animals, and when the customers and when the victims left their animals with the defendants, they were told that there'd be at no time would there be more than perhaps 6 to 10 animals at any one time boarding at the facility. Some of them were told as few as 6. One of the families was told that there may be 10 dogs there, but there was never any mention that there would be up to 28 dogs staying there at any one time. They were never told that there'd be possibly as many as 33 dogs staying there at any one time. The 33 figure comes from our counting of the reservations within the Hughes' own ledger book. We believe on the night that the incident occurred that there were at least 20 dogs boarded inside that room. And that's important, because when you consider the fact that these victims, these customers, they could have selected any facility to place their dogs while they were away. I mean, it wasn't a matter of cost, it was a matter of trust. The Hughes held out their home as a unique boarding experience for their animals, for their pets, for their family members, and that was just not what was delivered to them. The fact that all these animals perished on that day is a direct result of the fraud that the defendants perpetrated. Had they not lied about the type of type of boarding home that they were running, the number of animals that they would allow in the home, the manner in which they would sleep the dogs, we would not be here today. And then when you look at what happened on the day that the animals were discovered, on the morning of June 20th, what's especially shocking is the fact that you had Jesus Cabrales' dog, Sonny, who was seen alive when the discovery occurred, he, according to the phone records, did not pass until about 4 or 5 hours after the discovery. And within a 1 mile radius of the Hughes' home are veterinary facilities that they could have taken Sonny to. And within each contract that the board signed with the Hughes', it stipulates that should the dog require veterinary care, that they would take the dog to receive that care at the cost of the owners. So it wasn't even a matter of saving money or saving costs. It was just a gross act of negligence that just was not committed, was not done by the defendants. They were away in Florida. They had time to instruct their family to take the survivors to the vet, get medical care for them, but that was just never done. And in fact, the only thing that they did do was lie to the victims repeatedly about the fates of their dogs. Just hearing the stories of how many victims were told that their dogs ran away, that the Hughes didn't know what happened, the dogs were gone, and that caused them to contact their friends, their family, to go around the neighborhood, put up signs, to take time off of work, to scour the neighborhood. And all this was happening while the Hughes knew exactly what had happened. They found out that morning, as soon as the doors were open, they were getting calls from their employees at the facility about that the air conditioner had shut down, that the dogs were dying in the room, and they neglected to be truthful to the owners about that fact. Now, when you look at this case, there are really two elements to it. The first element being the animal cruelty element, the torture that was inflicted upon the 23 dogs that were in that room. And I believe Dr. Mangone, his explanation of what they must have went through in their last moments, I think is very compelling and is a very apt description of what those animals went through. The second element of this case is the fraud, the crime that was committed against the owners in getting them to entrust their pets to the Hughes'. The state is recommending today that the defendants be placed on 3 years of supervised probation for each of the 2 felony counts to which they are pleading. The state is endorsed now the plea calls for a flat jail term of 23 days. The state believes that jail is appropriate as a term of probation. However, in light of the impact that was felt by these victims, in light of the sheer number of victims present in the courtroom, the state believes that 23 days should only be a floor for the court to consider. The state believes that 90 days is a much more appropriate jail term for the defendants in this case. In the alternative, the state also would ask the court to impose a 230-day deferred jail term as a term of probation to ensure that the Hughes' do abide by the terms of probation once they are released from their initial jail term. With regard to that initial jail term, the state would ask the court to impose the jail terms simultaneously on both defendants. The defendants have had ample time to make arrangements for child care or for the supervision of their children while they are in custody. Thus, we would ask for them to both be placed into custody as of today. If the court is inclined to stagger the 2 jail terms, the victims have asked the court to place Mrs. Hughes in custody first. With regards to the term of probation that the defendants served their community service obligation at the Maricopa County Animal Control, after hearing the statements made by some of the victims here today and Dr. Mangone, as well as our discussion in chambers, the state is going to withdraw its recommendation that the community service be served at the Maricopa County Animal Control. The state would also recognize that that is in accordance with the recommendation of the pre-sentence report writer. Lastly, Your Honor, with regards to the 3 terms of the 3-year term of probation on each felony count, the state is going to ask that the court run those terms of probation consecutive to each other. The state believes that an extended period of monitoring is warranted in this case. The probation contains a prohibition against the defendants operating an animal boarding business or operation. The state feels very strongly that for as long as we can impose such a prohibition on the defendants, that is advisable, and thus we would ask that the 2 terms be run consecutively. What also is of concern to the state is that since this plea was entered into, the defendants have communicated in a manner with the victims to provoke and aggravate them. The first posting being the post on the day that the plea was signed, in which Mrs. Hughes proclaimed that it was a great day for the Hughes' family. I know that message caused many of the victims to feel that the Hughes were somehow getting away with something, that they were getting one over on the court. Then the Hughes made several postings on Facebook. One posting showed a picture of what appeared to be a new puppy and a rabbit in their possession. There was also a posting about a new kitten. These new animal acquisitions, they appeared to be new animal acquisitions which occurred after the plea was signed, which would seem to circumvent the spirit of the plea, which was to prohibit the Hughes from obtaining new animals. We've spoken to counsel about that, and they are representing that these animals were acquired prior to the plea taking effect or prior to the signing of the plea. However, just the manner in which this behavior was publicized on the internet in a manner which quite frankly caused great concern amongst the victims, causes the state to look upon, or causes the state to ask the court for greater supervision in this case. Lastly, the news that this morning Jesse Hughes was attempting to connect to or gain access to the Facebook postings of the Gilbert 23 support community is just, and this is after we had told them to back off the social media, not to have to do anything on social media that might provoke the victims. It's just another cause for concern for the state, Your Honor, and it makes us believe that the Hughes may not be taking this plea seriously, and because of that, we are asking that the court impose the extended term of supervision and impose the deferred jail term and raise the level of initial jail. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is that everything from the state, Mr. Chung?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Thank you, Judge. Judge, we have several family and friends that are here in support. We call them individually to come up.
Yes.
We'll invite Mary Jane McGrath to come up. I almost said her original name.
Again, folks, just like the people I've heard from, please start by stating and spelling your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Mary Jane McGrath, MaryJanemcgrath. Thank you, Your Honor, for hearing us out this afternoon. First of all, I just want to say it's been an emotional morning hearing all the stories of the dog owners, and it's truly heartbreaking to hear the loss of these dogs. I'm a dog owner myself and an animal lover, and my heart truly goes out to them. I remember the day that it happened, and I just wanted to kind of go back to, we've known the Hughes for about 4 years. They live next door to us, and where we live, it's not block walls, but like chain link, and there are bushes and things in the way, but we can see their home and their yard from ours, and then we also drive up and down the road in front of their home multiple times a day because that's the way to school. So, during the time that we've known them, when they started doing the dog boarding business, I did see the dogs in the yard all the time. I mean, Todd was outside with the dogs. Melissa said, oh yeah, he always has to wake up really early, he has to wake up with the dogs, he wakes up at 5 o'clock, take the dogs outside, they run, and he would be playing with them in the yard in the space between our two houses, and you know, they'd run around, throw balls, catch, fetch, and I would go visit Melissa. Our kids are similar ages, and there would be multiple dogs in the house, and I'd say, who's this dog? And she'd say, oh, that's so-and-so, you know, we're just watching for a couple of days, you know, the owners come back in a few days or whatever. But she's very open and like come and go, and the dogs would, they would just play among their children. They have a large family. They have children with special needs. She runs a very organized household. Anyway, back to the dogs. I don't know if it provides any comfort to any of the dog owners, but I did see the dogs in the yard all the time. They were always outside playing. They were in the home with the Hugheses. As far as the room that they slept in, as far as I know, that was just for sleeping, just at night, and not necessarily even all of the dogs were sleeping in that room. They would sleep with the children, and I just wanted to, you know, it makes me nervous to be here and to have to, you know, share this in front of the court, but I just kind of, as I've watched this whole trial go on and the media attention, just felt like their story really hasn't been told. It hasn't been represented. And I can understand it's like a exciting media story, and it really takes a life of its own and takes one slant. But as a next-door neighbor, I've seen a very different story, and that is they're animal lovers. They have been able to, you know, they had these dogs in and out of their home, and they were playing with them in the yard throughout the day, and they weren't just locked up in a room or locked up in a shed at all. They were really very much a part of their family, and that's what I have seen. You know, after this happened, I wasn't aware of like that specific weekend until we saw like helicopters and people outside, and we're saying, what's going on? And it was extremely difficult, I feel like, for all of us, and neighbors were texting, what's happening? And it was very, you know, we went over to their home that night. They were in tears, just crying, telling us about this tragedy that's happened, this horrible accident. Todd had never left the dogs until that weekend, and their daughter had accomplished this great honor of, you know, playing in this volleyball tournament, and so they decided to go and leave the dogs in the care of their adult children, and they were just so sad and so remorseful. These are dogs that they knew and had loved, and their own dog had died, and you know, they were in tears. And anyway, it's a whole different side, I feel like, of the story than has been portrayed. And then it seems like the media became aware, and they were kind of attacked, and it was, you know, media out in front of the house day and night, giant lights in our neighborhood. You know, it's a farm neighborhood, but giant lights shining on the home, trying to provoke them. They would sit there with their cameras and say things to provoke them and record them when they would react. And so I feel like really it was not fair in showing that there was definitely remorse on their side as well. Along with that, I feel like their children, it's been really sad because they have been victims of all of this negative media attention too. And there have been threats, death threats, horrible accusations made against them as parents. I know that, like, the girls are in high school with my children, and one of them had a teacher who found out that she was, you know, part of the dog boarding facility family, and just, you know, like, there's no innocent till proven guilty. Like, people took a definite stance, and it made it difficult. It made it difficult for them to interact and things like that, and it caused anxiety for those older two girls. Now they have 5 little children who have been at one time foster children, and now most of them have been adopted. But these children have special needs. Two of them have fetal alcohol syndrome from their, you know, birth families, and Melissa has had many children in her home. She has always felt like she wanted to always have an open crib for a baby who was in need. She said, we should all be doing this. We should all take care of these babies who are in need. There should be no baby who is left alone. Like, we need to provide this loving home. We can all hold a baby and love a baby. So this is kind of the open heart that she has. And so as they brought these children into their home, I just see these children who have special needs, and I understand that, the plea has been made and the sentencing, needs to happen, but I would just ask that you consider the children in how it's carried out, and that they have as much consistency from their mother and father as possible. They do run a very organized, orderly home, and the children have little chores and jobs, and they get along well, and they just kind of work together well as a unit. And I understand that, and this is the process, but just I'd ask you that you please consider the children in this situation that also didn't ask for this to happen. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, we would ask for the Hughes daughter to come up and address the court at this point in time.
Your name, please?
I'm Logan Brown, Loganbrown.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. I'm here to witness as the character of my parents, and also to finally I've been able to speak myself, not a lawyer talking for me, that I don't want to speak for my parents, but that I am truly sorry, and so we feel really bad for the dog owners, and I just wish that they would, I hope they know that we really are sorry and it's not the way they think it is. And I want them to know that I recently remarried on May 14th, just a few months ago, and before that I was living with my parents. So I've seen my parents pray for the dog owners that they can have comfort, and so I just want them to know that they do feel remorseful. I do know that after I'm sure you know, it was me and my then husband Austin Flake that were watching over the dogs, and I just want to let you know about how the dogs were taken care of, at least how we were taught, or Austin specifically, by Todd, to take care of the dogs, that wake up between 5 and 5:30 in the morning, take them out for 3-ish hours, 2 to 3 hours, just making sure that they get enough exercise and play and water, and that's when they would eat. And I know that the same process was explained to Mr. Chung and Mr. Umpleby when we did our pre-trial interviews, so I know they're well aware of this process as well. And then they'd go back in the room, most of them. Some of them, they would be freely out in our house playing, and they'd stay there for 2-ish more hours, and then they'd be taken out again before lunchtime, again for 2 or 3 hours, running around, making sure they get water, making sure they all got attention and got some exercise, and then that would happen 2 more times in the day, so 4 total. And then at about 9 to 10, probably 9 at night, is when they would go in the room to sleep. And on that particular night, there was a late pickup because of a flight delay of one of the owners, and her and her husband picked up the dog at 11:30 at night. Hearing 11:30 was the last time we had gone in the room. We had seen that they were healthy and that the air was flowing fine and that they were fine and happy. And so I don't know if that helps the dog owners, but they were taken care of. They were well taken care of. They weren't just shoved in the room like people are saying. I'm sorry, it's been really hard to watch my family go through this, and I haven't been able to talk. Another point I want to make is my siblings who have, fortunately the younger ones, the 7-year-old and down, they've been sheltered just because of their age and their innocence, and my parents choosing not to not to tell them these things, but it's hard to keep it from two teenage girls. So the oldest teenage sister that I have is Britain, and she's actually 17 today. Today's her birthday, and she's a junior in high school now, but she failed her sophomore year. She had to be seen by a psychiatrist because of all these death threats that our family had been getting and the things that caused our family. It's hard for teenagers, kids and teenagers, and even anyone to understand that you're being taught something in school. You go to history class or government class and you're being taught about the justice system, but it hasn't been very just. It hasn't been innocent until proven guilty. It's been, you're guilty and you have to crawl out of this hole that we're forcing you to be shoved down into. And the only way you're going to get out is if you agree to jail time. So, my sister has an extra hour of school this year where she can make up those sophomore classes that she failed. So she could continue on to be a junior and hopefully go off to college with the rest of her friends. My other sister also, they have both seen a psychiatrist. They see a therapist and a psychiatrist regularly, and they're both on 2 different kinds of medications. My sister Britain has gone to the ER because of panic attacks, because she has dreams that she's going to wake up and my parents are going to be taken away in handcuffs. I'm so sorry, I'm so emotional. I really didn't want to be here, expect to be this emotional. I apologize. Todd is actually my stepfather. My dad, who was my mom's husband, well, first husband before Todd, is the dad of me, my older sister, who is married and lives in Utah, has lived there for several years, and then my 2 teenage sisters, and he's not in our life. When I was 10, he left our family, and we didn't have much contact or visitation for a few years, and then after a few years, we just didn't really have any. So my mom and Todd met when I was probably 12, but they got married when I was 14, and he's my dad, and he's Brian and Ryan's dad. And then we also have the other 5 children. The youngest is in the process of adoption, but the other 4 are adopted, and they need a mother and a father. My 2 teenage sisters have been abandoned by their father, my father. And I know that they have to serve some time in prison or jail. But I just ask that you please consider my siblings. Like Mr. Chung said, they have made arrangements. I have stepped forward. A lot of the people here today have stepped forward, and we are willing to help my parents take care of the children. There are arrangements there, but it is not ideal, especially considering all that they have already had to go through. The last thing I want to say is that I know my parents are good people, and they have good hearts. And I'm only 22, and I know some 22-year-olds probably think their parents are dumb, but I've always looked up to them in the way they're able to serve others and just open their hearts. And anyone that truly wants to get to know them and does know them and has spent time with them and is around them for longer than 10 minutes knows that about them. They're not perfect. I'm not saying they're these perfect, shining human beings. I'm just saying they are good people. They want to do the right thing, and they're trying to do the right thing. And I love them, and I love my family, and I really want this to be over and not have any more of an impact on my siblings as it already has. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Brother Clark Warren.
Yeah, my name's Clark Warren. It's spelled C-L-A-R-K W-A-R-R-E-N. As was stated, I'm Lisa's younger brother. And glad I could be here today to talk to you a little bit about them. I was doing really good until Logan talked to you. I apologize for the emotion.
That's all right.
Maurice was my older sister. She's been there for me for a long time. And through some of the tougher parts of my life. I had a few rough years recently. Had marriage fall apart and had some bad things happen that changed my life a little bit. And I relied on her and Todd a lot. I spent a lot of time at their home, and they made room for me whenever I needed to be there and have a place to go where I could be supported and get the help that I needed. And they're genuinely amazing people, and they're raising a really beautiful family. You know, I have 6 children myself, and they have a bunch of little kids, and a lot of our kids, they kind of overlap in age, and it's like the Little Rascals. It's a pretty amazing scene. You know, we get together often. We have a lot of family activities, and it's really nice, you know, to have them here close by, for my kids to have cousins to go be around all the time and have a good time, and we've spent some real meaningful moments with them. And my kids love to be at their house. It's one of their favorite places to go because it's open. All the pets, you know, we like to get over there and play with the different animals. And in the past, my kids have always been excited to go and be a part of that. You know, we spend time eating meals around the table with them. We laugh and play. We do the normal things that family members do, debate all kinds of things. Melissa and I have been known to have a heated debate from time to time, depending on the subject. And even though she might not know it, I love those. I love those experiences with her. She can let me say what I need to and still put her arm around me at the end of the day and love me. When my family has been in a bind, when I was in a bind over the last few years, she would be there for me, and I could count on her and Todd. When I first got remarried, my wife had to work. But we couldn't afford daycare at the time, and Melissa watched our little street boy for us, my son that I adopted, for a year and a half, and never charged us a dime. And no matter what we did, she wouldn't let us do anything about it. So we looked for every opportunity we could to try to pay her back. And we've been good. We've been good. She's been at every special occasion that my family has ever had. She's never missed anything. She's there to support my kids for their games, and she comes to their church advancements, and she comes to their school activities whenever she can, and so does Todd and the rest of the family. Logan's a regular, and so are Britton and Ryan, and most of the other kids too. When we get together, it's we need a pretty big space. As I've watched them try to continue in the face of adversity over the last couple of years, help and serve the people around them, I can honestly, truly say that I've developed a true reverence for their faith and their goodness as people, because I would have just fallen apart, and they haven't. They've had moments, but they've kept it together. They've tried to do the right things. They've tried to do well by their family members and the people that support them, and most importantly, they've put a Herculean effort into trying to protect their kids and make a good life for them in the middle of what is an intense storm. And I look up to them for that, and I want to learn in so many ways how to do that in my own life. So I look to them as an example for that strength and how to rest in the middle of something that's so hard. I know there have been a lot of opinions shared today, feelings. I feel just like Logan and Maurice's neighbor that stood up here. I spent time in the home. I was going through a hard time. I spent a lot of time over there while they were boarding dogs, and I spent time with some of the animals that I saw pictures of, some of the dogs. I've shared couches with those dogs. I've watched football games while some of them were sitting on my lap. But it doesn't feel good at all to hear these stories and to hear the pain. I can hear it. It hurts. I can see these kids that have these animals that they love that lost these animals, and none of that feels good. I hope everybody in this room knows that. That's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling to be here and have to hear everybody tell their story and how bad that is. And I want everybody here to know that we take no joy, nor has there been any since the first time that I found out about this that I have experienced or seen among my family or Melissa's family in any way. It's a true tragedy and a horrible thing. My opinion, though, I think is important because, and my viewpoint of this family, I think, is important because it's been forged from a lifetime of firsthand experience of being with them and of going through hard times with them and celebrating good times with them. And that's something that can't be refuted. It can't be refuted by anyone or anything. Part of the truth of all of this, too, is that they're not perfect, and nobody's here trying to make them sound that way. I think about myself, and I think if I could come up with the worst lie I ever told in my life and say it out loud right now, and then have to be remembered for it for the rest of my life, what would that be? How would I live with that? And I see Todd, and I feel like that's what he's going through. I feel like he did something wrong, and he told lies or a lie, and that label has now been put on him, and that's what he is, instead of all the other things that he is, and that being one of them. And that's a hard thing to do. I think if all of us here had to take our worst lie and wear it around our neck every day for the rest of our lives, that would not be an enjoyable experience. And I would hope that as members of the community, we would not want that for each other, because that would be horrible for everybody, and not an experience I think any of us would want to have to live with. Sometimes we even, when we're terrified or depressed, when we feel threatened, we do things that we wouldn't normally do, and I think that this is an example where some of that happened. And I know how they feel about that. And I know that there's true, genuine remorse. My family's prayed. They've prayed. We've knelt together. We've talked about this at length. And I know, because I've been in their home and I've talked to them and I've experienced this with them, and I've been the one that's been there almost as much or more than anybody else in the family. I have firsthand experience. There is true remorse. There's no joy in this. They don't want to move forward having that hung around their neck for the rest of their lives. And I hope that people will find it in their hearts at some point, because it's not my job to put a timeline on grievances. But I hope at some point everybody can find it in their heart to forgive them for the things that they feel they did wrong. I was in their home a lot during those times, and I will say that I saw Todd and Melissa with my own eyes and heard with my own ears treat the dog owners respectfully. I saw them answer questions and disclose what was going on in their home accurately based on what I experienced while I was there, based on how I saw them handle the dogs and take care of the dogs and the animals while I was physically there. What the conversations that happened matched what I saw when I was at their house with their care of the animals. I spent time with some of those animals, like I said, and with Patrick also. He had been in the family for a long time, and it was a tragedy to lose them all. When I was there, Todd had a very regular schedule. It was meticulous. He was, in fact, sometimes when they were boarding animals, it was hard to get a lot of time with Todd because he was with the animals a lot, taking care of them and helping them. This is something that he's been doing all of his life. He genuinely loves animals. I know that seems hard to believe or hear in this setting, but it's true. I think that when I originally heard about this in the news, online, it seemed to be reported as a terrible accident. But with time, very vocal activists, from my purview, seemed to be selective media reporting and a pretty potent mix from some elected officials of what seemed like an almost unbending desire to get to this point. Now we're here. And I can say that I just want to make a couple more quick comments. I've lived through them receiving death threats, their character being assassinated in the media, and been along for the ride as misleading statements have been made by all kinds of different people. Charges have been dropped, charges have been refiled, not for everybody involved, but just for some people involved. And at this point where we have this tragedy and so many lives affected and a family that's literally been destroyed. Destruction of a family. Of all of these children and these two good people and their family has literally been destroyed, and it will take years to rebuild this back to where it was before this happened. We've got Todd, who can't get a job to save his life. I've personally been there as he's filled out application after application after application. I've heard him on the phone calling and calling and calling. And I've seen him break down and cry because as a grown man, I'm a single income family in my home. I take great pride and joy in trying to provide for my family. And I can truly relate to Todd's pain as a grown man that can't get a job to support his wife and kids as a direct result of what's going on right now and the way that this is played out in the media. He literally can't get a job. They have no income. Him and Melissa have been under this immense physical, mental, emotional, spiritual load. They're trying to carry it all, keep their kids safe. You know, Melissa's been characterized as this monster. She's not. And I think that it's a shame. I think that it's a shame that we would participate in this, that our society and the people around them would participate in this. We have 2 teenage girls that are seeing a psychiatrist and a counselor and are now prescribed medicine to try to deal with this. And they've gone through some really bad stuff, really bad. I don't know what I would do if people said the kinds of things to my teenager. I have one daughter, she's not a teenager, but when she is, if somebody came up to her and said, I hope you get raped and shot in the face. Okay, this is not normal. This is not how we do things, in my personal opinion. But they've had to live through that. Britton, the older one, has had to live through somebody coming up to her and telling her that they want her to be raped, that she should be raped and shot in the face, among many other really, really ridiculous and nasty comments, and it's taken a toll. So now we're in this position, just like Logan said, we're here. It's been said before me. Sentencing has to be done. A plea agreement has been arranged, and we're all here before you trying to put in our 2 cents so that hopefully this can happen with genuine equity as the goal. They're both taken out of their home. At the same time, I can't see how that's equitable. I can't see how that has an equitable result. I understand justice, but there also has to be mercy. And I'm pleading with you for mercy on my sister and her family so that they can finish this process out and get back to their lives and try to rebuild what they had. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Preston McGrath, next year.
Well, Your Honor, my name is Preston McGrath, Kresten, McGrath.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
As my wife said, we're the next-door neighbors of the Hugheses and known them for about 4.5 years. And when they first moved in, they were warm and friendly and very outgoing people. We quickly became friends and had lots of association with them over the years. When I think of this, what has happened to our community with this tragedy, it is so sad. It's so sad to hear the pain that is still evident in those who lost dogs in this accident, and it's so sad to see what effect this has had on this family. So I personally, when they first started boarding dogs, I would grill at night often, and I would be outside in the back porch grilling, and would see Todd out there with a bunch of dogs in the yard. And I even remember a conversation where I went to the fence and stood there talking to him because he had such control over all these animals. They weren't fighting with each other. There was a yard full of dogs, big dogs and little dogs. I mean, if we bring our dog close to any other dog, they go after each other. How is he able to do that? And he explained how, he's like a dog whisperer, and how he's the alpha male, and how he gets control, and then he's in charge, and they, follow him. And anyway, he seemed very capable and very good at managing that group of dogs. And I've been in their home, and I've seen dogs sleeping on kids' laps, watching TV, and dogs all around on the floor, and they did have them in their home as well as in the yard. But I saw numerous times with them out there. In June, when this horrible thing happened, I saw a commotion outside my back window, and I went outside and went over to the Hughes' home, and I was met. There was some dog owners and the Maricopa County officers there, and the officers were trying to calm down the families who were visibly distraught. And Todd saw me outside the fence and came out and talked to me. He was in tears, and he told me what had happened while they were gone in Florida, and this tragedy, and that the Maricopa County people were there. Initially, they were protecting them against angry dog owners, as he would bring each one in and have them explain what had happened. And anyway, shortly after that, it all changed. The media became involved, and our road in front of our home, on the side of our house and in front of theirs, became a media circus. It was craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Just the amount of publicity and attention, and the Hughes couldn't leave their house. They couldn't. They would be attacked, and it was like a zoo. Every night I would see, officers. Sheriff Joe in particular would come, get his makeup on, stand before the cameras, do the latest newscast, and then he would leave. And it got so bad they couldn't go to the store. They couldn't leave. Other concerned neighbors were bringing food and handing over our back fence so they could get it to them without being harassed by anybody, until it finally calmed down enough that they could leave. I was so shocked that reporters talked to us, and Maricopa County officers came and talked to us as their neighbors, as somebody who saw them a lot of times. They have lots of animals. I've never seen them abuse an animal. I've never seen them treat them bad. In fact, their kids taught our kids how to have rabbits, and you freeze a water bottle at night, and you bring it out, put it in the cage every day, and you replace it. And we would tell them what we saw, just the facts of what we saw, and it was never reported. It was never mentioned. It was so slanted in the media. I just couldn't believe it. I could not. What I realize now is that I don't believe things. Don't believe things in the news anymore. I think there's probably another side to that story that is not being told. They were vilified. It was international news. I personally saw it on the London News Times webpage. That what was happening to my next door neighbor. It was just crazy how it got. And I personally heard a truck one day. I was in my backyard, and I heard some obscenities being yelled at a truck as it drove by their house. I ran out, and they turned around and went back the other side. I tried to get their license plate, but they had gone on too fast. And the family has been abused and attacked. And if I believed the story of the Hughes that I saw in the media, I probably would feel the same way. They were portrayed as monsters. The images of those poor dogs in that shed was shown so many times, and like that's how they were cared for in that shed. They were left there in the heat or whatever, as the standard operating procedure or whatever, and they made them out to be monsters. But I can tell you that my interaction with the Hughes is not that they are not monsters. They are good people. They do care for these children that they fostered and then fell in love with them and adopted. They have 7 kids at home still, and in fact, in a plea to perhaps have staggered sentences, we've helped to arrange for child care just for today, and it's 4 other families who are taking their whole day to watch some of the Hughes children so they could even be here today. The thought of having both parents out of the home would be, in my opinion, just even more of a tragedy. That's what that's what's already happened. I also have concerns that if, I know that mistakes were made in this case all around. And Maricopa County officers who've been involved have made mistakes, and that's been demonstrated in some of the hearings that have already gone on. I would be concerned that if the Hugheses, were to serve under that jurisdiction in that jail, I would be concerned that there's a conflict of interest there, that there is perhaps not, that's maybe not the safest place for them to serve their time, if some other arrangements could be made if need be. But I just want to leave you with the thought that this is, it's like 9/11, you know, we're approaching that anniversary. Horrible, horrible event that affected all of us in some way. This horrible, horrible event has affected all of this community, these poor people who have lost these dear animals, the Hugheses, and it continues to be a tragedy. It continues more and more. More abuses happen in this case. I just pray that we could all come to some point of healing, that the Hugheses have taken responsibility. They are planning on serving jail time, or they've agreed to that. But the effect it has had on their family, with Todd's inability to work, the stresses that have been on the family, the abuse that they've seen and been victims of, I think has been just beyond anything I could imagine, and that that be taken into consideration as you make your final ruling on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Judge, our final person that's going to address the court from a civilian standpoint is Todd's father, Jesse Hughes.
All right.
Hard copy of letter. It'll be easier on your eyes. There it is. Go ahead, yeah.
Your Honor, I'm Jess Hughes. It's Jesshughes. And I think most people have owned dogs and they know how special they are. And I think we all probably had them come into our lives and have a very, very special place in our hearts. I know over the years we've buried a couple of dogs and some other animals. We've always had animals in our home, and our children, they enjoyed the animals. And Todd especially enjoyed the animals, and he studied them. He liked to see like a hermit crab or whatever. It didn't matter what it was. He enjoyed animals, and we had a special dog that when they'd come home from school, she'd sit on the back porch and listen to them one by one. Sometimes it'd be one, sometimes two of our sons would be out there, and she'd just sit there and listen to them like she really understood, and I believe she did. And I have a health condition with Crohn's disease. And there'd be times when I'd be in my chair trying to kind of just let it pass, and she'd show up. And she'd sit there right by me, and I'd become aware of her. I'd look at her, she'd look at me, and she'd wag or tell, and she really knew how I felt. And that's when I really understood that she understood my children. And I think dogs are special, and I also have been told that, we are all God's creations, and that He's not going to, at the end of our lives, we just don't vanish into nothingness, that we will return to the God whose children we are, and also our pets will be there too. And I've always told my children, hopefully you'll live good enough that you can go back to heaven where all dogs go to heaven. I really believe in that. And as a family, World War II, both grandfather served in World War II, and also two of my uncles in World War II lost their lives over and headed up to Germany through Italy, and they had children, wives and children that they never returned home to. And I got to watch my cousins grow up without their parents. And so I know that losing someone, or even a pet that's really close to you, is a tough experience. But I'm sure thankful that one day we'll be reunited. Had another uncle killed in the Korean War. Okay. And then over the years, as Todd would make a mistake, as parents, we tried to help him realize he made the mistake by paying the price for that mistake, and learning from it, not beating him down over it, but just help him learn from it, so perhaps he'd get smart enough not to make that same mistake again. And it seemed to work pretty good with him there. I'm sure he'll continue to make mistakes like the rest of us, but I've found that he does learn from his mistakes and tries to improve. He told me when he started this, they started the Green Acre thing, after he'd been doing it for a couple of months, he says, "Dad, I think I found my dream job. I get to work with dogs every day." And he enjoyed them, and he really appreciated the opportunity to do that. And the few times that we were in their house, I'm uncomfortable with too many dogs in a house, but anyway, the kids and Melissa and Todd felt very comfortable with them being in the house there. And as a matter of fact, there was one of the dogs that even slept by Todd in his bedroom because the dog needed that security or something. And they did sleep with their children there. They enjoyed the dogs. And I don't believe it was ever there was more than 10 or 11 dogs running through the house or out in the yard and stuff. So, but anyway, I know he really enjoyed trying to do that. And anyway, I'd like to go back to when, like I said, I'm Todd's parents. I'm also Melissa's dad in my role there. And when they met each other and they decided they'd get married, as parents, we kind of got, wait a minute. And I went and talked to Todd, and he and I visited for a while. And I says, now, you're getting in with 4 girls that are really, and they're special. If you got to know them, you'd really appreciate them. But and that's a big, tall order for you. You're still a little young, and they've had experiences that you're going to have to catch up to. And he says, yeah, but Dad, I want to go there and share my life with Melissa and help where I can with raising those children. And then a little bit later on, we thought that was, and we accepted those girls as our grandchildren. And we were fortunate. We thought we were really fortunate to have such special girls included in our family. And then after they'd been married a while, they told us that they were going to adopt 4 boys. And I said, I don't think you can adopt because you've got 4 kids, and there's a lot of people out there trying to adopt. And I don't believe they'll look at you. And he says, well, we're going through the foster care program. And so they went through all that stuff of training and things. And then it's a long story, and I'm not going to be long with this, but each of those kids that came into their home, and they had a couple of others come in there, but they were placed back with their parents, and we're hoping that worked out with them. But they were special kids, and we immediately became attached to them. We thought when they gave us a call, says, hey, we have Tommy and Daisy in our home, and we thought Daisy was going to be a temporary placement, but we drove down there thinking, okay, we have a daughter that has some children, and when they were born, we were right there, and it was such a special feeling. As a matter of fact, I didn't know parents could have such a special feeling as when our children had children. Anyway, we thought there'd be a different feeling there when we come in because they were going to be adopted, maybe. But when we came into the home, both my wife and I, we felt that they were ours. And it was just the same feeling that we had for our daughter's children. And we thought, what a special thing that we now have them in our life, and we have that kind of a feeling with them. And we've watched Melissa and Todd and her 4 daughters bring them into their home, and and help them through the difficult things that they had already experienced in their lives. And I've seen that constantly or consistently in their home, that they've done everything they can, and I'm sure they'll tell you they fall short, but they've done everything they can to try to help those children. And anyway, my wife and I, we retired and we went to Alaska. We were given an assignment there by our church that we could work with teenagers up in Alaska. And so we were in Alaska when this situation happened, and we didn't know about it until probably the second day. We received a phone call from one of my wife's sisters and telling us this, and we called Todd and got hold of Todd, and we tried talking to him, and he had a very hard time talking to us, and we could tell he'd been traumatized, and he was beside himself, and he tried to share with us things, and one of the things that he told me at the time is, Dad, I've told a couple of lies, and I've misled some people, but I didn't want those people that had put their dogs here to see the condition of their dogs, and I didn't know what to do. And anyway, and I didn't know what to tell him except to try to do the best he could to fix the situation. And we considered possibly going home, and I said, no, we'll handle it. Plus my wife and I, our brothers and sisters and our parents lend a hand to try to help support them there. Another thing that I tried to do is I tried to measure. I was a school administrator, and as a principal, I took care of discipline, and I always tried to measure what is it that's going to help this young man or this young woman who's just made a bad choice decide inside to make the internal adjustments instead of someone smacking them and making them hold the line. What was it that I could do to help them make the internal adjustments to correct that behavior and learn from it? Because I knew as a principal that these young kids, they were meeting life as it was coming at them. And they were making decisions sometimes on the fly, sometimes they'd think through it and get the wrong answer probably because it got them in trouble. But most of them would adjust that behavior on their own eventually. Some of them I'd have to build a fence around them and do something to help them. And then some of them I had to do that on a regular basis, and they never did learn to behave properly without that wall around them. But I believe my son Todd and Melissa are quick learners. I know they feel this is tragic. I know our family, our parents and our brothers and sisters have been, we believe in prayer, and we believe it's important, and we've prayed for comfort and healing to come for those who have lost that special pet in their life. And we have empathy for them. We know what they're feeling and how it is a tough situation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, as far as our last statement, we'll be splitting it up. I'll be going first, and then Mr. Smith will finish it up. I need to lay down a little bit of groundwork for this. Before the Hughes moved into that home in June of 2012, they had lived in a home. They had their own pets. They had dogs, and they had family members that would come over and drop off the dogs, say, hey, can you watch them for a while? And that's kind of how this all began. They started doing that, and they found that they not only enjoyed it, but they were very good at it. Todd was very good at it. Pretty soon there's some friends that were asking about it, and could they watch their dogs or their pets for a while? And they would agree to that, and that's what it grew from there. As it grew, they decided to move, and they went out to the property they're at now. They found this place. They moved in June of 2012. When they moved in June of 2012, it had already been remodeled in a way where you had the two AC units on either side. You had the sleep room in the back, and the AC system, the way it is today, was the way that it was when they moved in. So they moved in, and as they established their home there and their family, this service that they were providing began to grow. And it grew and it grew. And it grew because of the good service that they were getting, because they did have concern and love for these pets that were coming into their lives. They had their own pets. They had in this property. They had their own goat, cats, and dogs, and they had a goose, and they had these chickens and rabbits. And as it grew, the word got out. We've heard about their own postings about the Disneyland for dogs and how they did this, but it wasn't just that. The reviews were all positive. There were stellar reviews on the different boarding websites that were 5-star. And that's how this grew. It was a wonderful place. It was the open area that they had said it was. It was cage-free. It wasn't a kennel. And so as this grew, they began having the business carried on. One thing that is important to know is that for their boarding services, the charge was $20 a night for each pet. That's what the charge was. It was the least expensive of the boarding facilities, at least the ones that we had researched. It was the least expensive. And so what would happen is that when they were contacted by a dog owner, the dog owner would make an appointment. They would come in. Oftentimes it was Melissa that did the first intake because Todd was taking care of the dog. Sometimes it was Todd, but usually it was Melissa. And the owners would come over, and they would, the facility was open, and they would come into their home, and they would see they would see what it was like. They would talk. There was a contract that was signed that listed out what was expected, what was going to be provided, and by that contract that was signed and a copy given to the dog owner as for them to keep. So they have, as this went forward, then the dog owner would bring over their dog, or the pet owner would bring over their pet, and with the dog, what would happen is it had to be integrated into the pack. Todd did set himself as the alpha male, and he did that because it worked, and it helped control the pack as it worked. In the intake, or if asked, the words from Lisa about the number of dogs, generally it was 6 to 8, 6 to 10 dogs is what was generally there. Sometimes it was more, sometimes it was a lot more, but that was very infrequent. And as the dog would then be dropped off, to make sure that there wasn't, because this was an open area, I mean it was the acre lot and everything, to make sure that there weren't any fighting, there wasn't any fighting going on or any problems when the new dog came, they would take the dogs that were there and they put them in usually 2 different places. One would be that sleep room that was there. The second would be, there's I call it more of a barn, not the shed where the dogs ended up, but a barn area where they could put the dogs. And so they segregated them because what needed to happen is after that dog was dropped off, Todd would then integrate that dog into the pack. And if that dog was an alpha dog, it needed to be integrated very gingerly, and that's what Todd did. He would do that, it would integrate into the pack, and then as part of the pack, that limited the fighting and helped in the control of the animals. How long the dogs were out and how long the dogs were inside, whether in the home or in the sleep room, depended upon the weather for the most part. When it was nice weather, the dogs were out a lot, and they were out and about, and that's the way they existed. When the weather was inclement, or if it was hot, like in the summertime when it was becoming hot, the dogs were taken at different periods of time, as explained by Logan, into that sleep room. The sleep room was air conditioned. They had air in there. They kept it down below the regular parts of the house. It was like 70-something degrees in there, and it was kept. They kept in there, so they were in there. Oftentimes, some of the dogs would even come over to the door waiting to get in there because it was nice and cool. And you can see it's often that way because in the summertime you find dogs they are hiding under the bush, in the shade. They sometimes go into whatever, they have a doghouse or something, and that's what it is. And so in this case, it was essentially that same thing. And so they were kept in that sleep room during the heat of the day, yet they were out and about and played and everything else during those specific times, as Logan indicated. That's what would happen. The feeding was on a schedule. When the intake occurred and the contract was signed, the directions of how the pet or the dog was supposed to be fed was given to the Hughes, and that's what was followed. As far as water was there. There's a watering. It was kept outside on the porch, and all the dogs had free water while they were out and about, and they could drink any time. And that was all out. When we get to this incident, as things happen, another thing about this is that there's a number of boarders. Aside from the boarders or the dog owners that were involved in this incident, there are approximately 111 other boarders that have used that facility. And those are the ones that were posted online. And a lot of them posted online about the greatness of that boarding facility there. I want to read one of those boarders, the dog owners. After the incident occurred, all the things that were being said and posted about the Hughes, she actually sent some information to MCSO, and then she, out of the blue, sent that similar information to us. And this is what she said. What I didn't state to MCSO as directly as I will right here is that there seemed to be a love from Todd and Melissa Hughes for their children in their care, their animals, a dog they were fostering, and the dogs they took care of. I cannot envision them ever wanting to hurt those in their care. I boarded up to 3 of my pets 5 times between October 2013 and May 2014, ranging from 2 days to almost a week. Every interaction with Todd and Melissa Hughes was positive. Melissa was easy to reach at all times and shared comments about my animals at pickup. Todd seemed to have a soft spot for animals and established himself as a pack leader for the dogs. Their home was clean and calm. I saw them having positive interactions with their children when it was just them as a family and during an organized play date. From what I observed, both of them seemed to enjoy fostering both children and dogs needing a home. When the Hughes were going to be out of town in June, Melissa let me know in May who would be watching the dogs while they were gone in June, their daughter and son-in-law. I did not go on my trip in June, so May was the last time I needed boarding. That's from an objective dog owner. Withhold the name because she was actually afraid of having her name out because of the negative things that have happened. That is indicative of what it was like. When the sleep room, when the dogs would be put in at night, what hasn't been said yet is that the dogs were in there, and some of these dogs, the owners would ask them to be in their, is it a kennel or a cage? The little carry-on thing, and some of the dogs were required to, that's how they slept. And so they weren't out on the floor. They were actually in those, on those shelves that we saw in the pictures. And that's how they were, that's part of how they were. Also, regarding the room itself, the AC was in there. There was they would often leave there was a window to a larger room there that was left open, and that was used because as the pack, they would go into that sleep room and sleep as a pack. That's how they were in that. While they were at the facility, they were the pack, and that's how they would sleep. As indicated, Todd and Melissa went to Florida for their daughter's national volleyball tournament. And then on Friday, they got the call. And just before then, during that week while they were gone, there were other boarders that would call and say, hey, we're running, we've got to go here, can we drop off our animals? And Melissa would say, sure, because she didn't want to, the way that she felt was that we have to help them out. They need a place for their pet to be so they can go to this emergency or go to whatever they're doing. And that's what, so that was happening, and that happened. And that influenced the number of dogs or pets that were there during that week or on that Thursday and Friday. The call came. They did everything they could to get home as quickly as possible. When they got home, it was a horrific scene for them. An awful scene. They were and before they got home, they were talking with their daughter and son-in-law what to do. They did whatever they could. There's no CPR certification for dogs. When they were starting this business and moved to that place, they had looked for licensing, for regulations, for direction on how to do it. There is none. There was nothing required, and there were no state regulations, nothing regarding the boarding of dogs in this type of situation. There was no direction on how to do CPR certification or whatever it is for the dogs. They did the best they could. It was 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning when this occurred, or when it was discovered. And during that time, Your Honor, they did what they could. There was 5 dogs that had not expired, and yes, they did the water on them and ice, and some of them survived. One of them survived looked like it was doing very well and did very well for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden passed away. After that, when Todd and Melissa then arrived home, in that situation that they couldn't believe they would find themselves in, one of the most challenging situations anybody could be placed in, they did what they could, but it was tough. And Todd acted in a way, as we've heard. Was it the best way? No. Would he go back and change it if he could? Yes. But going through that, they also learned that it was, from what they could see, a part of the wall down in the corner had looked like it had been chewed through, and exposed wires, which were shorted. Based upon that, it was believed that had shorted out the air conditioning, because it was clear that the air conditioning had gone out. That was the belief. That was the belief of those that were in the home of Todd and Melissa when they got there. That was continued to be the belief when deputies arrived later. That was their initial investigation decision, that that's what had happened. And that's what Todd and Melissa were going on. It had to be fixed quickly, and the reason it was fixed quickly is because it was shorting, and it was a fire danger. And so they did. They fixed it. Shortly after the discovery, within that morning, the AC was back on, approximately 11 o'clock or so. It was back on and working. It's pure speculation as far as the number of dogs, what would happen, this many dogs, that many dogs. But what we know for sure is that AC went out. It was about 100 degrees that Thursday on the 19th during the day. It was about 90 degrees at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. It was about 80 degrees at 5:30 that next morning. But for that AC going out, there would have been no tragedy. But it did. And this is what they're dealing with. And this is what all the dog owners then had to deal with. When the law enforcement appeared, it was still very traumatic the way that they were treated. But they were doing the best they could, and the law enforcement, they were doing what they could. But they went through, once the law enforcement got there, how the release of the dog, it was all governed by the deputies. What happened with the dogs, back up just a little bit, before they got there, because of the room where these dogs were at, it needed to be cleaned up. It couldn't be left that way. And so the decision was made to take the dogs and move them into that shed. They were moved into the shed, and that room was cleaned. They had little children there. They had their family. It was part of the home, so it needed to be cleaned up. And then that's why it was. And that's why those dogs were moved over to the shed. They tried to do the right thing, and that's what they've always tried to do. Their situation has been explained pretty well by their family. They had their children there. As foster parents, DCS does monitor them, has been monitoring, have to monitor and make sure that everything is fine at the home. Has to make sure that it is clean, that it is appropriate for children, and because of that, it's appropriate then for the pets and the dogs that were there as well. In light of that, to give some idea, some parameters on what has been done in the past, there's a few cases in the last few years, last couple of years, that I believe are relevant. There's a State of Arizona versus Andrea Mickle case, M-I-K-K-E-L. In that case, Miss Mickle was an animal hoarding. She had over 100 animals at her property. Her home was filthy. There was feces all around in the home. It was stacked up with all kinds of materials and items, and it was filthy. It was found that these animals that were inside, which included horses, donkeys, zebras, and other large animals, as well as roosters, sheep, chickens, pigs, miniature horses, and rabbits, and more, that it was determined that for weeks they were neglected. That there was no proper shelter, water, food, or medical attention. In that case, it was charged as misdemeanors. I believe it was up to somewhere around 70 to 90 charges, but they were all misdemeanors. They were charged in the justice court. Not only were they charged in the justice court, but the resolution of that case was suspension of prosecution. The other case, and just as a line for that, to get into the suspension of prosecution, she had to have no prior felonies, which was the same as this, not been convicted of misdemeanors within the last 5 years, which is this, same as this case, have not participated in any previous diversion programs, which is this, have no other criminal charges pending, which is this, and not a member of any criminal street gang. Those are the requirements, which she met, and which the Hughes would meet as well. An additional case is the State of Arizona versus Michelle Meyer Salazar case. In that case, there were among approximately 27 horses boarded at a ranch. It was found that 7 were severely neglected horses, and after they were found, 1 had to be euthanized that night, 2 other horses had to be euthanized thereafter, and the 4 others had required extensive treatment according to the acceptance treatment. It was found that Salazar had not fed or cared for the horses in several weeks. In that case, she was charged with 7 felony charges. The resolution of that case was that she pled to 1 count as amended, cruelty to animals, as a Class 1 misdemeanor. She received 6 months of probation and no jail time. The last one is State of Arizona versus Tyler Wade Tippett. In that case, this was a petting zoo owner that would also take his pets to homes for different occasions. He had a pony that he had taken to a home, and as he was bringing the pony back, he had not secured it properly in the trailer. He, in going down the street, hit a bump. The horse was thrown out and dragged. And it was dragged for the streets while people were honking their horns trying to get his attention. After he stopped, and upon being interviewed, he was incredulous that there was a problem. He said that the horse wasn't even hurt. However, after being taken to be treated, the pony had to be put down because of the injuries that it had suffered. But this individual was callous to what had happened, and callous that was found to the other animals that he had. But he was charged. He was charged with 1 count of a felony charge. The resolution in that case was pleading to count 1 as amended, cruelty to animals, Class 6, undesignated felony. In that case, he was placed on 2 years probation, but no jail. As we go forward, and Mr. Smith will talk more directly about the jail time and the conditions thereof, we've had contact with the Graham County Sheriff's Office.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment because, again, the court reporter by law has to have her break. We're going to stop here for 15 minutes, and then we'll continue on.